In today's episode with Brad Carr, we talked about how you can use creativity as emotional release. We talked about approaching setbacks with a stoic mindset, accept failure as a learning opportunity, and how integrating action, pushing towards your goals, the sense of surrender, letting go, changes everything. Welcome to Man Quest Define Meaning, where we help men navigate modern life, find their true purpose, and redefine manhood. I'm your host, James, and each week, inspiring guests share their journeys of overcoming fear, embracing vulnerability, and finding success. From experts to everyday heroes, get practical advice and powerful insights. Struggling with career, relationships, or personal growth? We've got you covered. Join us on Man Quest Define Meaning. Now, let's dive in. Good morning. My name is James. I'm the host of Man A Quest to Find Meaning. Today, I have my special guest, Brad Carr. How are you, Brad?
I'm doing really well this morning, James. I've been out and about in nature, doing a little bit of breath work, walking amongst the trees, and I'm feeling pretty grounded, pretty masculine, and I'm ready to go, ready to rock and roll with this.
That's something actually I've been doing lately is going to a woodland as part of my morning routine, doing my journaling, my reading, and all the other bits and bobs that I usually do here. I've been doing it out in nature, and it is very grounding. I do find just being grounded into your day is, in some respects, more productive, because yesterday I got so much done. It's unreal. There's a tip already, is to get yourself out into nature. Use it as an opportunity to ground in the morning.
Absolutely.
Let's start off, Brad. If you could tell us your story.
Wow. Okay. So, I'll start where all good stories start, and that's right back at the start. I was born into a home that was incredibly destructive and turbulent. So my dad was an alcoholic, very emotionally immature, I had a bit of an addiction to the chaos cycles that life can sometimes throw our ways. He clearly lacked some education around how to deal with emotions, as did my mum. My mum was no saint through all of this, as I'm sure she would admit now. So for the first 2 years of my life, I spent with my father, and since then, I haven't seen him. So I've lived 30. It was my birthday yesterday, so 31 years.
Happy birthday.
31 years without my biological father in my life. So he was replaced by another man. I think immediately my mum had already jumped into one relationship before she left my father. When things, shit really hit the fan in that first relationship, my mum was ready to be saved by this other man, but actually it was a case of out of the frying pan and into the fire, I think is the term that she used to describe that relationship. And from memory, that was 6 years of pretty much hell, really. He's incredibly manipulative, almost verging on psychopathic. My mum learned a couple of years into that relationship that he had actually beat his previous partner almost to within an inch of her life. This lady tried to reach out to my mum at the time, warning her about this man, and my mum was having none of it, thinking that this woman was crazy and trying to twist my mum's image of my stepfather at the time. So that relationship ended, and guess what she did then? Jumped into a relationship with another man who turned out to be equally, maybe not equally as volatile and aggressive, that same ilk. So she obviously had a habit of seeking her own familiar in these. So those early relationships really just gave me a foundation and an education into how not to be as a man. I had the most incredible examples of what not to do, how not to act in terms of losing control, erupting, separating from the ego, and recognizing when emotions are imbalanced and maybe when it's best to keep the mouth shut and not say anything. So in that sense, I'm incredibly grateful for the early life that I had. I spent my teens and particularly early adult years feeling pretty lost in life, actually, and myself to just drifting aimlessly, trying to fit in with the world and people around me. I probably sacrificed a lot of my own sense of self in pursuit of trying to become what I thought I needed to become. As a means of survival, it's intelligence. I believe that we have this ability in us as humans to adapt, almost like a chameleon would to its surroundings, to stay hidden, but then also to be seen in the right kind of light so that you gain that acceptance. So yeah, basically at the age of 26, I suffered my first taste of heartbreak. I had my first relationship and she ended it on New Year's Eve of all times. And actually within a few weeks, she'd ended up with another man that I had some suspicions towards the end of the relationship that there was a little bit of something going on. So that really sent me on a whole process of introspection and reflection, firstly to figure out why this girl that I believed was my world and I thought I was going to be getting married and having kids with, why she decided that actually she wanted to be with somebody else, which I can go into more detail a little bit later on in the podcast. But the effects of that kind of episode were just profound in terms of the kind of journey that it led me on to figure out who I was and to maybe serve as the catalyst to spark me into the transition to become a man, right? Because at the time I was pretty irresponsible, reckless, I partied a lot, went out drinking, doing some other substances, and yeah, just not really taking my life seriously. So in hindsight, it's no wonder that she had her eyes on somebody else, and I take full responsibility in that sense, which I think is the best way to deal with any instance like that, is to look in, as with everything, to see our own role in whatever event is taking place in our world. I decided that the best way to deal with my pain was to turn myself into a bodybuilder. They say breakups make bodybuilders, right? So that's certainly what happened in my world. So at the age of 26, I really started to hit the gym hard, and I was training 6 days, sometimes 7 days a week for a minimum of an hour and a half, sometimes up to 2.5 hours. Started to watch all the documentaries, Arnold Schwarzenegger documentaries about pumping iron and the mindset that goes alongside that. And what I did one day at the kind of peak of my mini depression, when I was laying on my bedroom floor with tears in my eyes, thinking about how painful it was to have been dumped, I decided to pick my mobile phone camera up and take a selfie, post it to an Instagram page to begin telling a story of what I realize now was a story of transformation, healing, recovery, facing the shadows, becoming a man. So for 2 years, I avidly tracked my journey into fitness and physique transformation, which later then became more of a psychological transformation, which is what I was more interested in the whole way through, how we can change fundamentally our thought processes and who we are. So that was my kind of the birth of my, not just my physical journey, but also my spiritual journey, which has led me to where I am today, which is actually, rather than becoming a fitness instructor and sipping smoothies on a beach somewhere, telling people how to measure their macros, I am now a professional photographer and a writer. I actually ventured into the world of nature around about 2018 as a kind of extension of my fitness journey. It was then me heading out into the world to take pictures of the world around me and also myself in that landscape. But I quickly got bored of taking pictures of me and my biceps in nature and actually flipped the camera around, because I'd picked a camera up by then. It was my sister's camera that I walked past one day and kind of thought, oh, I wonder what I can do with this thing, because I have a mindset that wants to progress and always improve. So that was the logical way to take my mobile phone snaps to the next level. So yeah, I went out to Pista Freda in just top end of mid Wales, a huge waterfall, absolutely beautiful, magnificent place, and very, very spiritual actually, as I've learned in recent years. I think it's a druid site or linked to the Celtics, kind of Celtic people way, way back. So it's quite fitting actually that really became the portal, if you like, into the world of nature for me, which has just been instrumental in my healing journey, in my journey towards masculinity. Yeah, stepping into my mature self would not have been possible without nature and without the trees, really. So for the past 6 years, I've been building my portfolio of photographs and avidly writing alongside as a kind of process of reflection, introspection, and to make sense of my existence, and also to give back to the world and share what wisdom I've picked up along my own way, because I believe that I think that's the ultimate responsibility of as a man, is to adopt the kind of king archetype and look after the people around us and share what wisdom we have gathered along our way. So that's, in a nutshell, my story so far.
Nice. I can see so much resemblance to myself, because for years I was lost. And it was a breakup when I was 31 that triggered this whole spiritual path, the whole idea of, I don't want to be at this point again. I need to improve myself. So if we go to when you were lost and you didn't have a clue where you were going, what was it that actually triggered that idea that I need to improve myself?
To be honest, I think it was something that was innate inside of me. I think as a child, growing up around people who were looking outwards, my parental figures were looking outwards at each other to blame, point fingers, and to avoid looking at themselves. I feel like it's something that I've always naturally done, is to place myself at the center of everything. How is this impacting me? What is my role within this situation? So immediately after I'd allowed myself a couple of weeks really to feel what I needed to feel, the emotions, to feel the sadness of the breakup, of loss. It is traumatic, losing somebody very close to you in life. So after I allowed myself that little period, it was just a process immediately of looking in to find the answers. I believe that the way for everybody is inside of themselves. I observe the world and I see so many people looking outside, and I've been guilty of doing it, looking towards celebrities, towards substances, towards computer games for person and validation and acceptance and approval. But really, everything begins within. Yeah.
Over the years, I've got to the point where I love to introspect. So much so, it's become an obsession. So at this moment, I'm trying something completely different. So rather than looking inside, introspecting, I'm trying to be more mindful of what's inside. So rather than, say, for example, I'm feeling angry, rather than asking myself, why am I angry, and trying to come up with an answer, I'm just observing the anger. And that, for me, it's quite hard, because for the last 8 years, I've been introspecting. And it's got to a point where so being mindful is completely different, but also the same approach. Do you find the approach of being mindful, but also the idea of the inner wisdom that you get from nature?
For me, being in nature is the mindfulness and the meditation. And I guess in terms of kind of masculine, feminine dynamics, I feel like the understanding, the scratching your head, trying to work things out, trying to understand, trying to make sense and diagnose, I feel like that is incredibly masculine. It's the seeking understanding, right? And the logic to think of why, joining the dots together. But actually like you mentioned, how you'd sit and allow the feelings to be there and maybe just become that observer of the feelings, that is incredibly accepting, and maybe relying more on that feminine quality within the psyche to just be and not have to figure things out and apply meaning and logic to everything. So actually the being in nature is incredibly important for that, in terms of creating the balance and the integration of the two parts of myself to become one.
So if for example, let's say there's a guest or somebody listening to this podcast episode now, and they're in this moment, they're feeling lost. They don't know where to go. How would you suggest they become a bit more introspective with regards to their situation?
Great question. I think the key is actually acceptance to begin with, and to maybe stop resisting where you're at the moment. I think being lost is an incredibly powerful part of life, and a powerful place to be, really, because I feel like by losing ourselves, we're actually pulling off those masks of ego and identity, or we have the opportunity to do that if we allow and accept to lose ourselves from time to time, to lose what we think we are so that we can become perhaps what we truly are. I would say acceptance is the key, and stillness as well. Just allow yourself to sit from time to time and allow the chaos to reside inside so that you can then find the order. And in that order is where the direction ensues, I believe. And for me, there's no better place to find stillness than outdoors in nature, particularly beside some still waters or amongst the trees, which are incredibly still, grounded and rooted. And by surrounding ourselves with that energy, we become that same energy.
Yeah. So I can see acceptance because from my own journey in Lost, and then even now, I've been through quite a transformation, but there's still times when you get lost.
Yeah.
And so I feel that you're right. The lost is the part of us that it's the part of us that we need to take, shows the different masks that we are wearing, the different parts of ourselves, which no longer suit who we are.
Yeah.
And I feel as though pulling them layers off, you're completely right. You're starting to explore different paths, different avenues,
Absolutely.
different personas.
Sorry, and I'll just interject there because that you've just taken my mind somewhere else. Because in being lost like that and exploring these different avenues and different opportunities, different hobbies, for example, we then allow ourselves to tune into our soul, which actually knows the way. In becoming lost and maybe giving up all of your existing hobbies, maybe even it's relationships and friendships that you have to cut loose, but actually in doing that, you then allow yourself the opportunity. It's like this blank slate to then move forwards and to try these other different things and other relationships and other friendships, and realize that actually, that feels more like me. There's something inside of me that deeply resonates with whatever this is. So maybe I'll go towards that. The soul knows its true path. We just need to come into that place of stillness and maybe non-identity to allow that to resonate with us, and maybe for the intuition and the feelings of joy and love to take over, which is I believe, where our true path lies. And actually, life is a continuous process of losing ourselves and finding ourselves at the same time, right?
Yeah. That the other day, I was procrastinating. I was getting angry at myself because I lied about not going to work, saying I was ill, and all these different things. And by the end of the 2 days of lying on the sofa, feeling sorry for myself, I actually realized that underneath all that, it's okay. It's okay to feel angry, to feel overwhelmed, to procrastinate, to occasionally lie. It's okay. They're all parts of ourselves. And it's this idea that all these different parts I'm talking about are all parts of who we are. And so if you try to resist them and try to really push them away, they're just getting stronger.
Sure.
And when I came to this area of acceptance, there was this idea that underneath all these different things came down to loneliness.
Yeah.
And it also came down to connection. And then, so it's this realization that I need to be able to find people who I kind of align with, who I can have great conversations with, who I can chat to about different subjects that I love to talk about, where I can, like this podcast now, the podcast episodes, the actual launch in the podcast brings me excitement, brings me joy. And there's this idea that all these parts of who I am that I'm shredding are actually allowing things like the podcast to come through, being able to put myself out there, being able to be around people who I align with, who I can dance with, who I can chat with, who I can enjoy with.
Yeah. And in that version of yourself is the most integral and virtuous one, right? So when you're that version of yourself, then you don't feel that inner conflict and need to perhaps tell little lies to do what doesn't really align with you and resonate with you anymore. So when we're in that version of ourselves, there's no need to self-sacrifice and contradict what our true beliefs are.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's I also realized that when hanging around certain people, I'm a lot quieter.
Mm.
I'm perhaps more introspective than I am
Yeah.
letting myself out. But then when around different people, like when I go to a static dance,
Mm.
I almost come out of my shell.
Yeah.
So it allows me to see that there's people now in my life who perhaps I don't align with as much anymore.
Yeah.
But then there's different new people who I do align with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that constant change process that we need to go through as humans, to always observe and analyze and think, okay, what's serving me, what isn't serving me anymore, and to just allow that to constantly shift us towards the highest version of ourselves.
So let's go back. How did having your father, shall I say,
Yeah.
men in your life, how did that really impact who you are today?
I think I touched upon it a little bit earlier on when I mentioned that they really set the examples for how not to behave as a man, or even just as a human being, right? But particularly as a man, it's really shaped my vision for what I want to be as a mature male figure. So by basically turning a blind eye to everything that they said, unless they were really controlling and domineering, in which case I had to abide and agree. But by just discarding the imprints that they try to leave on my psyche, I feel like it left me with this huge question mark just over that half of me. So who is the male part of me, the masculine part of me? Then in having that void, it allowed me to look outwards at heroes. So I've had a lot of heroes throughout my life, particularly heroes from films. I gravitated towards the kind of typical masculine archetypes, like Maximus from Gladiator, for example. If you remember Maximus, yeah, a lot of boys' hero. People like Aragorn from Lord of the Rings, even the Gandalf, who's the wise elder. I feel like I idolized footballers for a long time for different reasons, and other celebrities as well. But it was particularly the film characters that I really looked towards, and almost found myself in hindsight, found myself psychoanalyzing them essentially, even though as the immature self, I didn't know that I was doing this. It was just completely unconscious, but I would just break down their personality types and understand that, oh my goodness, that's who I want to be. I probably have my mum to thank for much of this as well, in the way that she would speak of the men that she admired as well, that she actually couldn't attract into her life for various reasons. But she guided me towards looking at these other kinds of men who were virtuous, integral, wise, truth-seeking kind of men. So she, in her communication, she shaped me to seek out those figures within my own life. So I feel like what that has also done in latter years, that kind of 50-50, that void of my psyche, has allowed me to, at the same time, adopt parts of nature in many ways. So I see myself as this jigsaw puzzle that I'm constantly taking pieces away from one side and building pieces of myself based upon the places that I go to and the interactions that I have with the natural world. For me, it's all about embodying certain parts of the landscape. Whether I see trees, for example, have characteristics to me now, which I can then adopt as part of myself. So my upbringing has allowed me to be in this constant place of growth and change and development, and embodying what is naturally within myself, but using the kind of natural world as the mirror for that, right? So I call nature a portal, and it's the portal to the self or portal to the soul. So by journeying into nature and interacting with that wild man, if I'll reference Iron John, are you familiar with the book Iron John? Yeah. So by venturing into nature, it's perhaps allowed me to access parts of my own inner wild man and integrate those into my being now.
Nice. Say, for example, there's a person out there who perhaps hasn't got the right male figure or the right male role model. How can he go about finding that role model or finding the right attributes to bring in a healthy man?
I feel like there are places that I've looked in my own life that I could recommend now for people to follow. For example, looking into a gym environment, there are certainly men within the gym environment, some perhaps negative role models within a gym environment too. But if you're looking more towards some of the wiser, elder kind of figures within the gym, then there are certainly mature male figures in there as well. So how would I determine between the two types of people in terms of maybe perhaps more negative, maybe more ego-driven kind of male figures and the more soulful? I feel the figures that I would look away from in a gym environment, for example, would be perhaps the ones that are maybe pointing fingers outwards and maybe trying to make jokes out of certain people rather than leading from that place of maybe looking inwards and making the joke out of themselves instead of other people. So I've certainly had instances where I've observed people a couple of really big guys trying to ridicule others and take the mickey. And I think, hang on a minute, that's not the way that I would want to be as a man. I would like to lift people up and build people into being the highest version of themselves. So certainly there are figures in gym environments that could help. I would also say to maybe look for some kind of martial arts. I've recently started Aikido training at the beginning of this year, and there's the man in charge of that is somebody that I look up to in many ways for his spiritual philosophies and values, and leading from a place of what is this training teaching us about ourselves. Yeah, anybody who's leading something that is centered around the development of a human is somebody that I feel like I could learn from. But at the same time, you can learn from everybody. As much of learning how to be is by learning how not to be as well.
How do you personally navigate setbacks, or when something goes wrong, how do you deal with it?
By stepping back from it for a while, allowing it to be what it is. If it's a failure, for example, then accept it, allow it, but don't allow it to beat me. I tend not to let anything get me down, even for a minute anymore. It's okay. I'm very stoic in my approach to life, where control what you can control. Things happen, right? But what can we learn from it? Is it something that I've done, or not done? For example, you mentioned about telling lies before. Is it something that have I told a lie, or have I acted out of integrity? In which case I can control that because it's from a place within. So it's about learning from everything that goes wrong as a lesson for the future so that it will eventually go right. So I don't really believe in allowing anything to keep me down for too long.
Nice. How do you define a healthy man?
What a question to ask. A healthy man is somebody who can lead, but also be led. I feel like there's a combination of both that needs to go into a healthy leader. It's about being able to recognize when is my time to step in and lead. For example, now if I was outdoors in nature and I was on a walk, I would feel very comfortable in stepping in and saying, okay, follow me, know what I'm doing. And hopefully people will be receptive to that because they can respect that I've spent a lot of time in the outdoors and have that innate ability to navigate and lead into the right places. But at the same time, it's also about knowing when somebody else in the group is perhaps more capable and being able to set down the ego and be like, okay, I'm comfortable allowing this person to step in, and that doesn't make me any less or any better than this person. It's about, we're a team, we're trying to achieve a common goal. So let's analyze the situation and allow the most capable person to lead. So I think leadership is one of the keys in what a healthy man looks like to me. I'd also say integrity as well. So do words and actions align? And actually, do actions speak more than a person's words? I think would be the key for me in looking at what a healthy man is now, because I've been somebody who's talked the talk, and particularly with things like business goals and dreams, I've talked a lot about what dreams I have and what I'm going to do. And then a few years down the line, I haven't done it. So there's me acting out of integrity. So what I find now is to maybe keep my mouth shut about my goals and dreams and to actually just set about doing them and allow the actions to speak for you. It's about how you can hold your energy so that people around you already know that you mean business and you don't need to tell them I mean business. People just know when somebody is acting with integrity. What else would I define as a healthy man? I would say being able to admit that you've screwed up. There's no shame in making mistakes. As I mentioned before, mistakes are essential in leading us to the success of the future, right? I think anybody who's gone anywhere in life will admit that they have, made an insane amount of mistakes along the way. I think it's Michael Jordan who talks passionately about how many shots he's missed. I can't remember the exact quote, but there's a quote from him that is quite profound in admitting his failures. So that is definitely one. And I have a lot more respect for anybody who can hold their hands up rather than in the moment maybe becoming defensive and arguing and pointing fingers and blaming. I don't believe that there's any place for blame as a healthy man. I also think just being able to have a laugh. You mentioned dancing before. That's something I struggled with for many years, actually allowing myself to be really free in my dance moves and to not kind of hold anything back. For a long time, I was very rigid and had quite a stoic face, and I wouldn't allow myself that freedom of expression. So in recent years, I've really been working hard to be the first person up on the dance floor and to really lead in letting myself go and allowing my face to show what I'm really feeling, which is joy. I feel like joy is so squashed in the world, generally speaking. I feel like a man who can allow himself to feel joyful and allow himself to express, that's a true man, in my opinion. Are there any things that you can think of that you'd like to add on top of that, James?
So I personally, I'd add in being able to embrace your emotions.
Sure.
So whether that's anger, grief, shame, happiness, joy, excitement, I feel as though as a man, we need to embrace all of them, but in a healthy way.
Sure.
So like anger, for years, I would use anger through fighting, getting aggressive, but I wasn't really a healthy way to deal with it. So it's about dealing with it, such as passion, boxing or martial arts, and focusing in anger, maybe with a quest. You could focus your anger on a quest.
Absolutely.
So it becomes your fire, almost like a phoenix in the background.
Yeah, I love that. I'm glad you mentioned anger, actually, and emotions, because a lot of people are surprised when I tell them that anger is now fueling my creative works and that there's a lot of anger contained within my photography, because my photography is, quote unquote, of beautiful scenes and beautiful woodlands. So people are generally very confused when I say, there's a lot of anger in that work, because anger is something that I believe I think it's probably the second most powerful emotion after love within a human. And it's so potent if we can learn how to handle it. And like you say, how to use it as passion and fuel. It can drive anybody's mission. I feel like anyone who's achieved anything in life is probably channeling some kind of anger in their works, right?
Definitely. I also feel as though as men, we should be grounded, but then also allowing ourselves to let loose, to be in the air.
Yeah.
So the idea of action combined with surrender is a perfect example. And I feel as though for years I would push and push, but then it would almost quash my grow because I was trying to force things to come rather than doing the right action steps, but then allowing it to grow. Yeah, and I think having, as a healthy man, it's good to have your own circle. Definitely support, guidance around other men.
Yeah, so we don't have to take our problems and our emotions to women, which upsets that dynamic and maybe polarity that we're all seeking as partners and couples. That's how I feel, anyway.
Yeah, with regards to myself, I feel as though, yes, talking to men, but then also talking to women in a safe environment, in a safe, what would you call it?
Container,
Yes.
Yeah.
So being able to express your truth I think women tend to come across as more intuitive than
Mm,
men as a whole. And so
yeah.
I feel as though they pick up stuff anyway.
Yeah.
So if you're honest with them from the beginning,
Oh, yeah.
there's no hiding. You don't have to hide
Sure.
anything.
Yeah. My partner
Yeah.
certainly is so receptive to me when I take my truth to her, although it's very painful in the moment for both of us because I can sense that it's causing a lot of distress inside of her at the time. It's always, our connection is always so much stronger after I've done that because she's able to hold that space and allow me to express, which she knows is from a place of truth and groundedness, and she knows it's for the highest good. But she can sense it anyway, so I might as well express it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think he's probably as well as the idea that as a man, sometimes we hate feedback. So if we get told you're not doing very good or
Mm,
you're making me feel this way, we almost get into that defensive mode, as you said earlier. And so I think if we're able to allow ourselves to accept that what we say might have something that she might say, which
sure.
might as well hurt us. So we've got to be brave enough
Yeah.
and willing enough to go into that.
You've also then got to trust that your partner is leading from the same kind of place with some integrity and truth at the center so that you can see that it's for your highest good then, right? Rather
Yeah.
than maybe coming from a place of wound or control, for example.
What strategies could you recommend to people if they wanted to start to incorporate more healthy male attributes?
Oh, James. Would you be looking for kind of hobbies? What would?
So I'll start off. I think just to let's get the ball rolling, and
Yeah,
that
sure.
way it's easier for yourself to realize what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So great male strategies might be to join a men's circle,
Right.
as an example, as I
Right.
mentioned before. Or it's even getting a close friend where you are able to talk about things which might be happening in the moment, where you
Yeah.
can be brave enough to talk about stuff which is really deep and wounding.
Sure.
Another example could be find a hobby or a sport, as you said. I'm
Yeah.
robbing yours now. To be able to utilize anger or
Yeah. Yeah.
grief in a healthy way.
Sure.
It could be an idea of perhaps going to do a men's retreat. So I've
Mm,
done things, reading books, for example. What a King, Warrior, Magician, Lover
yeah.
is a
Beautiful
great book,
book.
as an
Yeah.
example. Also, there's the things like MKP, the Mankind Project, Unmasked Man, just to name a few. And these kind of places are where we can start to learn how we can start to express ourselves
Sure.
in a
Yeah.
healthy way.
So I think the key for me, based upon my own journey, is actually finding something that has allowed me to express beyond the mask, beyond this kind of stoic, I'm okay. Actually, on a deeper level, I was never okay. There was a lot of shit that I hadn't dug up and dealt with from my childhood. So my relationship breakdown was actually a huge blessing in that it sent me back to my childhood years to dig up what was buried. And a lot of that was heavy emotions, anger, shame, guilt, fear was and has been a huge one, still is in some ways for me. So actually by finding myself a creative outlet, which through photography and writing, I find the perfect cocktail, in my opinion, for anybody to express those kind of repressed emotions that perhaps were causing me to erupt and self-destruct, particularly in the container of the football pitch when I would just completely lose my shit from time to time, and this ugly version of me would come out because of what was buried so deep within. And being somebody that had such shame around emotions based upon projections from my father figures who would not really allow any form of expression and any form of innocence and emotion, actually, I find it very difficult to express things when I was seen. My reservations around dancing was because I was seen by other people. So the creative outlets that I found were I was able to create from a distance, from behind the camera and behind the pen. It's allowed me to express parts and perhaps the deepest parts of myself, and almost allowed that stepping stone into now expression as a person and expression through being seen. So creative outlet for me is absolutely vital for anybody. And what you're doing with the podcast, that's creative. There are many forms of creativity. It comes in lots of shapes and sizes, but I believe that actually by having something physical that we can put out to the world is incredibly powerful, in that we can now show what we're doing with our deep pain and emotion. I also mentioned martial arts, the bodybuilding. Those are both opportunities to then get into the body and to express through movement and express through physical exertion, and also turn that pain, that anger, that frustration, that sadness into something that we can show to the world. Again, that's creative in itself. Yeah, I would definitely second what you said about getting people around you, men, preferably other men, but also women who can hold space as well. But from where I'm coming from, I feel like having mature men around me who are leading with integrity and truth has been absolutely vital. I have had some men throughout my entire life, really, in places that have stood in that place of father figure for me and allowed me to look towards them and seek guidance. So I think that is key as well. And yeah, I think those are probably my main ones for people who are looking for a bit of guidance on their journey towards masculinity and becoming a man.
Right, the creativity one. I'm the same. Back in 2022, I just come out of a breakup. I think it was my fourth or fifth breakup. And I was looking at somewhere for New Year's Eve where I can go dancing.
Yeah.
And I ended up traveling an hour and a half to go to Nottingham to go to a ecstatic dance evening.
Yeah.
And I never looked back. I went there every 2 weeks after.
Wow.
And I've been to countless ecstatic dance retreats and festivals down in Dorset. And it's one of the things I love to do is dancing.
Yeah. What is it about dancing for you? Why?
So initially, I was like very much like the typical male, had to drink to dance.
Yeah, sure.
But when I became more and more expressive, it was learning. It was the creativity. It was that being able to express myself, allow myself to move to the music, and that realization that I didn't have to, in my head, create the moves. I could allow my body to follow the music.
Sure.
So it almost become effortless.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like I resonate with you, what you're saying there, especially with the drinking and trying to portray a version of myself as a dancer. You grow up watching videos of hip hop music and feeling like, oh, I need to be able to dance like that. But actually, when you surrender, right, to the music, and the music controls your body in that way. So yeah, it's a beautiful form of expression.
It certainly is. And one last thing I would like to mention on this topic is purpose. Purpose, I believe, is a key thing. As a healthy man, we need to find a purpose in this world. And it hasn't necessarily got to be a job or a business. It could be, your purpose could be bringing up your kids. It could be in a healthy way. It could be finding a hobby. It could go out into nature and connecting with nature. That could be your purpose.
Sure. I will also follow on to that. Thank you for raising that point, because you just triggered me onto something huge now. Actually finding a purpose that is beyond ourselves as well, right? A higher purpose, whether that's something that you may call God, whatever name it is, whether it's the universe or I don't know, there's so many names, but the belief that there is something outside of us that we are maybe answering to in our behaviors. So every cause has an effect. So then that is also then going to make me act in a higher way, right? Because I'm not going to want to hurt you, because that's having a result then on you and also the people that you surround yourselves with. So it's that belief that everything that we're doing has something outside of us that is greater and more powerful that, we then almost need to answer to, right?
Yeah, definitely. So can you tell us, what is it that you do and how can people contact you?
So I'm an artist first and foremost. I use the mediums of photography and writing to express, firstly, but also to continue and carry forwards the deepest wisdom from nature, the kind of ancestral wisdom that is around us at all times in the form of consciousness that I'm really just a channel for. So a lot of my writings focus on kind of psychology. It takes a psycho-spiritual approach. So if people are seeking wisdom, then they can find my works online at www.bradcarphotography.co.uk. If it's writings that people are interested in, then there's a journal section with a subsection called Contemplations, which is where I put a lot of my deeper pieces of writing that hold the secrets from nature. So it would be great if people could navigate over there. I also post all of my works to social media. So I'm on Facebook at Brad Carr Photography and Instagram at Brad Carr Photos. I do host photography workshops, and next year I have a photography workshop / creative retreat in the heart of Erari, Snowdonia, which is a 5-day intensive dive into the world of creativity, using the camera as the main tool, but also looking at the journaling practice as well that can act as the balancing point between the being and the thought and the masculine and the feminine. It's a holistic approach to being and health, and also integration of both sides of ourselves. So there's a lot of depth to what I'm doing with my photography work, and my retreats and workshops aren't just merely taking pictures, but they're a self-development and personal development kind of workshop at the same time.
Nice, like it. Thank you very much, Brad.
Thank you for having me on, James. I really appreciated the space and the questions that you've posed to me, albeit they were incredibly thought-provoking and caught me off guard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.